Hi everyone, it's Detrina from the Alluring Bead Boutique and the Bead Mat. And I'm coming back today and I'm going to do a little bit of a redo on an earring I showed you guys how to make a while back. In a previous video, I was doing a Pinterest try and I showed you how I came up with this, making this earring just from trying to figure out what I had found on a Pinterest pin. And I found out that I was sitting and playing around with these antique brass hoops while I was down at my daughter's. And I discovered a much easier way to get the larger beads to sit into place, and a much easier way to go about making something in this technique. So the materials I'm going to use today, and if you want to make a pair of earrings, you'll need to double this up. So I have these hoops, and they are 30 millimeters on the outside diameter, and they are 28 here on the inside. And they are antique brass, and I got them at Joann's in one of those packs of all the different kinds of hoops for a couple, $2 or $3. And you can also get them on Joann's website. I have 2 ear wires, also the antique brass, and 2 6 millimeter jump rings of the antique brass. For each earring, you're going to need 8 fire polish, and these are 4 millimeter jet iris brown. So you'll need 8 for each earring for a total of 16. You'll need 2 6 millimeter olivine crystal bicones. You'll need 2 8 millimeter crystal rounds, faceted rounds, and these are also the olivine. You're going to need 2 colors of delicas, and these are actually 2 slightly different size delicas. The gold ones are transparent silver line gold, size 11, Mayuki Delica. And these green ones are size 10, and let me make sure if they're hex cut. I don't think these ones are hex cut. They're not. They're just color lined crystal light peridot, size 10 delicas. And you'll also need about 3 feet of 6.006 fire line. I'm using the black satin, and I'm also using a Pony brand size 11 beading needle. Now, to get started, you'll just simply take your thread, and down here at the tail end of your thread, you'll tie 2 overhand knots to tie the thread right onto the ring, just like that. Just like we started in the previous, when we made this earring. I'm going to set some of these things out of my way so I don't get my working thread caught on any of it as we work. So to make the earring, we're going to first use brick stitch to get the center, the first row of our inside beads done. And that'll be including these fire polish. And we're going to be using only the size 10 peridot green delicas for this part. Now, if you remember on some of my other videos and other ones that you might have watched about brick stitch, you always do your first stitch of a row of brick stitch by picking up 2 beads. So I'm going to pick up 2 of my size 10 peridot, and I've got my working thread here on the back side farthest away from me on this ring. And I'm going to let those drop down into the center just like this. I'm going to bring my thread around to the front side of my beadwork. I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go back up through that second bead I picked up. And I'm going to keep my needle here on the front side of this hoop. I'm going to pull the thread. And I'm going to pull it a little snug to get the 2 beads to sit beside each other. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to straighten this first bead a little bit. So all I have to do that is come right down through, from top to bottom, through the first bead I picked up. And then I'm going to come right back up through my second bead again from bottom to top. And this time I'm going to put my needle all the way through the hoop to the back side. And that just kind of straightens up those 2 beads so they sit nicely beside each other just like that. So now I've got 2 beads on. And I'm going to add 1 more because now I'm into my second set. I'm just going to pick up 1 of my peridot, size 10. I'm going to let it drop down. I'm going to take my needle and bring it on around to the front and come back up through that bead and go right back through the back side of my hoop again. And when I pull it into position, way over here, it will sit right beside the other two beads, standing up nice and tall like a little soldier. So now let me show you what I figured out about getting these other beads added on. So instead of adding our delicas and then coming back through and trying to figure out how to get the crystal in place, we're going to go ahead and pick up our 4mm bead, and we're going to pick up one of our size 10 green delicas. I'm going to let all that drop down to the beadwork, just like this. I'm going to bring it around and hold it with my finger, just like that right there, so that I can come up through just this little delica that I picked up. And I'm also going to go back to the back side of my hoop again. So now when I pull it into position, my little fire polish bead is sitting snugly in between the third bead I added and the fourth delica I added. So now I'm just going to use regular brick stitch and add 2 more delicas, and then I'm going to repeat that step for adding the fire polish. So to do this, you're just going to do regular brick stitch on a frame, pick up one, come around to the front side of the frame, pass up through from the bottom to the top of the delica, just like that. And poke the needle towards the back side of the beadwork again, and snug the bead into position beside the one before it. And we have to add one more. And then I'll show you guys my other little trick for not having to let the bead drop down every single time again. But first, let's go ahead and add this one. Come back around the front and come up from the bottom to the top. We're going to pick up another fire polish and another delica. And this time, instead of letting them drop all the way down, all I'm going to do, well, no, I'm not. Scratch that. I'm just going to let them drop down. And then once again, I'm going to use my finger to position the beads so they sit like I want them to. I'm going to come back around to the front of the bead, the front of the hoop, go up through that delica from the bottom to the top, and then go back through the hoop to the back side again. So now I just need to add 2 more of my delicas and repeat that until I have all 8 of my fire polish beads. Well, I'm going to do it until I've got 7 of my fire polish beads on. And then I'm going to come back and show you guys how to add the last fire polish. So just go ahead and do regular brick stitch until you get all the way around to you need to add your last fire polish. And I'll meet you back. I'm going to jump back in and just give you a special note here. As you're adding the fire polish and the delica on the opposite side, when you pull everything snug, make sure that your fire polish beads actually lay down against the inside edge of your bead frame. So I've worked myself back around to the start of my beadwork, and I need to add my last fire polish bead. I added my third little green delica right here, and my thread is to the back in position to pick up this last fire polish bead. So I'm going to pick it up and let it fall all the way down. And now, because we already have our first bead, our 3 beads here already in position, all we have to do is come down through that bead closest to the right, which is the direction I'm working towards. Yeah, pull into position. Just like we've done, and then just finagle and wiggle until you can get that fire polish bead to sit exactly where you need for it to sit. Then we're going to come up through the peridot bead in the middle. And I'm going to keep my needle towards the front right now because I'm just positioning. I'm going to pull that up. Make sure my tail thread doesn't get hung up in there. Just like this. And I'm just going to wiggle around and make sure that my beads are sitting nice the way that I want them to. If I need to, I can maneuver my beads just a little bit at this point till everything looks nice and neat. So now I'm going to come back down through the third bead right here. And now I'm going to flip my work over. And I'm going to come back up through the middle bead. And all I'm doing now is just reinforcing and securing those two ends of my beadwork. And so now I'm going to come down through that first one more time, like that right there. And I'm going to flip my work. And what that does is it positions my working thread here to the back. So now I'm just going to pass right through this little fire polish bead. And the thread will snug up. It will not be a visible thread, as you can see. I'm going to come down this bead right here, the next bead over, the delica. I'm going to come across my frame, and I'm going to come right back up through that same bead that I'm exiting. So I just carried the thread around the frame, come right back up through that same bead. And now I'm in position to do my next step. And I'm going to put my needle to the back side of my beadwork just by passing it through the center of the hoop. So now I have my thread in the back, my tail thread is here. All of my beads are nice and secure, and they feel nice and snug along the bead frame. Just like that. So in the next step, what we're going to do, let me get something a little with a sharp tip here. If you'll notice, here's our row of green delicas. And then what I've done is instead of putting a scallop of upright beads over top of the crystals on this earring, what I've done is I've added some beads using brick stitch here in between each of the fire polish, and then I've just created a half loop of beads connecting the brick stitch beads there and there. So, and I'm using the gold delicas for this step. So let's go ahead and I'll show you how to get started on that. So if you'll remember, we're going to start with some brick stitch, so we'll need to pick up two. So pick up two of your 11-0 gold delicas. And then on row 2 of this type of brick stitch, you know that we have to grab the thread bridge. So if you can see, I'm going under that thread bridge between the second and third delica of the previous row. And I'm just grabbing under that thread, and I'm going to pull it through so that my two beads sit like this on the top. So now I need to come up through the second bead I picked up, just like that. And I'm going to pass my needle back around to the back as I do that. And I'm going to pull till that little bead stands up nice and straight, like this. So now it's standing up. All right, I'm not going to worry about straightening my first gold delica. I'm going to do that when I come back around to the end. So now we're going to pick up 6 of our gold delicas onto our needle. All right, so I have 6 of these little gold delicas on my needle. I'm going to jump over top of this fire polish bead, and I'm going to grab the thread bridge between the first and the second bead on my little set of 3 green delicas here on the far side of that fire polish. If you can see, I'm under that thread. So I'm just going to pull it all towards the front also, just like this. Then I'm going to come up through from bottom to top through that very last delica, just the one. And I'm going to go back to the back side of my beadwork again. So that when I pull, now I have stood that little delica up to mimic the brick stitch one over on this side of my fire polish. So now I'm going to pick up one delica, and I'm going to do one regular brick stitch. I'm going to come under the thread bridge between the second and third green delica there. Pull it through. I'm going to go back up through that delica from bottom to top, and also pass my needle through the hoop to the back side. And there we have that one stood up. So once again, we're going to pick up 6 of our delicas. I'll show you this step one more time. So I've got my 6 delicas on my needle. Once again, we're going to skip over top of our fire polish bead, and we're going to get under the thread bridge between the first and second delica on the opposite side of that fire polish. Pull towards the front. Then we're going to come from the front, and we're going to go from bottom to top through that very last delica we picked up, and push the needle through to the back. Now we have to do one stitch with just one bead. So pick up one of your 11 note gold and go under the thread bridge between the second and third delicas in that same little section of beads where you're currently working, right there. Push to the front and pull. Make sure that your bead doesn't twist on you, or the thread doesn't twist, because I think I just twisted it. So pull it again, just like that. And now I'm going to come from the front side and go up from bottom to top and poke my needle back through the hoop again to the back. So now I'm just going to repeat that, the picking up 6 and going around. I'm going to do that until I get my second delica added here on this last set of 3 of my peridot beads from the previous row. And then I'm going to meet you back and show you guys how to finish up that last little half loop of beads here. So now I've worked my way around, and I have this bead here, which is the last bead I added using brick stitch. And then I have my very first bead that was part of my first brick stitch when I picked up 2 right here. So I only need to pick up 5 beads to go over the top of my fire polish bead. Now, when I come across the fire polish bead, let me slide those off my needle. I'm going to come down through that very first bead from top to bottom. My thread is on the back side of my beadwork, so I'm going to push the needle from the top to the bottom through that very first bead and come to the front side of my beadwork. So then when I pull them into place, they mimic the exact same beads of my half loop over every single one of my other fire polish. But now I need to connect this first bead to the second bead that I picked up during that first stitch. So I'm coming out of the bottom of my first bead. I'm going to go up through the top of my second bead. I'm still working on the front side of my bead frame. I'm going to pull that through. But now I need to create the thread bridge between the second bead and the first bead. So I'm going to come right back down through that first bead again, from top to bottom. And that creates a thread bridge and connects those 2 beads and straightens them up and thus closes up the beadwork. So now I need to get into position here up to work on the inside of my little earring. So all I need to do is come back up through that second gold bead one more time from the bottom through the top here on the front side of my beadwork again. Oops, I didn't get the bead, I've just got the thread. Okay, so now I'm coming up through the bead. I'm still on the front side of the bead frame. I'm pull that all the way through. And now I need to go into, I'm going to turn my work upside down so I can show you better. I need to move through the next 3 beads on this little half of a loop going over my fire polish bead, just like that. And I want to be coming out of that third bead which each loop now has 5 beads over top of the fire polish, and then the other 2 are brick stitched here to the previous row. So come up through 3, and pull the thread all the way through. And that sets us up to do our netting for the remainder of the inside of our earring. And so I prefer to stitch towards the right, so I'm just simply going to take my beadwork and flip it over. I'm going to bring my needle back through the hoop so that I'm working here on the front side, just like this. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. So now we're just going to do some simple netting, and we're going to be working with that center bead in each set of loop beads over our fire polish. So I'm picking up 3 of my size 10 peridot delicas, and then I have to pay attention that I'm getting into that middle bead each time. So there's a total of 7 gold beads, the 2 that are brick stitched plus 5 in the middle. So you just count up 1, 2, 3, 4. In that 4th bead is the center bead. It just makes it easier to see than trying to count just the beads in the middle. So I count all the beads and pick the 4th one. So that lets me know I'm right in the center. Now just pull those 3 beads right into position. Just like that. And I'm just going to repeat that step till I come all the way around. I'm going to pick up 3 of my 10 peridot delicas. I'm going to jump over to the 4th bead, 1, 2, 3, 4, on my next set of embellishment beads, right there. Pull them in and repeat until I've come all the way back around. So I'm just going to keep working till I get ready to add my last 3 beads, and I will come back and we'll do it together. So I've worked my way back around. I have my last 3 11/0 or 10/0 delicas on my needle. I'm exiting from the center bead here. I want to go through the same bead that I started from on my next little grouping. So it's going to be the center bead that your first 3 peridot beads are exiting. So you might have to dig your needle around in there just a little to get right into the correct bead. But once you get in there, just push through the gold bead and pull your final 3 beads into position and snug up your beadwork so that this is what you should have. So now I want to add one more row of a few center beads here in the middle, but to do that I need to step up. So I'm going to step up by passing through the next 2 peridot beads so that I'm coming out of the middle one in one of my groupings of 3 right here. And just because I want to snug my beadwork up a little bit tighter, I'm going to move on through that next bead, the gold center bead, and then I'm going to push up into the middle bead of the next grouping of 3, just because the beadwork felt a little bit loose. So now I just have to push up into the center bead here, moving through 2 more peridot. And that has a nice little bit more tighter feel to my beadwork here in the center. And I feel secure about moving on to the next step. So now for the next round, I'm going to only use 2 beads. I'm picking up 2 of my 11/0 gold delicas. I'm exiting the center bead here from one of my set of 3 groupings. I'm going to skip over to the center bead of that next set and pass just through the center bead and pull the 2 little gold beads into position. Just like that. And I'm just going to repeat that. Let me get my tail thread out of the way here. Until I've come all the way back around and I've added my 8 sets of these 2 little gold beads in this simple netting stitch by going through the center bead of the grouping from the previous round. And I apologize, but when I'm doing videos, my light kind of gives me a little bit of a hard time. So I picked up 2 more gold, and I positioned them in between the center beads of my previous row. I'll show you one more, and then I'll go off till I'm ready to add the last two again. So pick up 2 gold. I'm exiting the center bead here. I'm going to jump over until I'm going through the center bead on the next set, which is here. Pull those into position. And you can feel them kind of pop into place. And I'm just going to keep doing that until I've come back around and I'm ready to add my last 2 beads here from where I started. I did want to mention that as I work, I am pulling those beads into position, and I'm pulling nice and snug to close up the center gap here. So I work my way back around, and I have my, actually I have one too many beads on. Glad I noticed that. I've got my 2 gold beads. I'm exiting the center bead here. I'm going to pass my needle through the center bead that I started this round from, right here. And pull those 2 last beads right into the position in the center, just like that. And now, because the center grouping of beads are going to be supporting my larger crystal, all I'm going to do is I'm going to reinforce this row by passing through all of the gold beads and the center beads one more time till I come back all the way around. So I'm going to do that for a count of 9 to close the beadwork. So there's the first one. I'm exiting my center bead again, so I will come through the next 2 gold beads in the next center bead. Make sure that you only get the center bead from that we worked with on this row. Now, once you've counted to 9, meet me back. So I went around my full set of beads that I added in this previous round, and plus 1 extra time, just to make sure the beadwork is nice and secure, and it's should feel really nice and firm to the touch inside, and it just makes everything have a more secure feel to it. And we need that because we're going to be placing a heavier bead in the center of all of this beadwork. So once you've done that, you should be exiting the center bead, one of your green center beads from the previous round. And we would need to go through just 1 gold bead. So we want to be coming out between the next set of the 2 gold beads we added in the last row. So that we're coming out in the center, right here. Then I'm just going to pick up my crystal, and I'm going to let it come all the way down to where it sits in the center of my beadwork. I'm going to come straight across to the 2 gold beads on the opposite side, and it doesn't matter which way I go at this point, but I'm going to go to the right, just so long as I remember which direction I'm going. I'm going to pass through the gold bead to the right and the next green center bead. And then I'm going to pull everything nice and snug, and my little crystal just pops right there into the center. But now I need one more thread bridge through that crystal to secure it and hold it firmly in place. And I'm exiting one of my green center beads. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to work through, just like we did on the reinforcing, I'm going to go through 2 gold beads and the next center bead. And I'm going to repeat that until I am exiting the beads at the top where I started from to add my crystal. So there's 1 set. My next set, it's 2. Make sure that you're staying on the proper row of your beads, which is the very innermost circle, the last row we added. And now I just need to go through this 1 gold bead so that I'm going to be right where I need to go back down through my crystal again. So now that I'm coming out there, I can just go right straight back down through my crystal, just like I did previously. And this time, when I go through the beads at the bottom, I'm going to go through the gold bead on the left and the peridot bead right next to it, just like that. And that puts a thread on each side of the crystal at the center. Puts a thread bridge to securely hold the little olivine crystal in place. And now I'm coming out of one of my peridot beads from the second to the last row. I'm going to pass down through that next green bead right there, and also go through the gold bead that's at the center of the little loop of beads over my little fire polish bead. Let me just dig in here so I can show you. So now I have come through my next green bead and the gold bead. And I also think I passed through one of my second gold beads, and that's fine, because I'm working my way back to the outside edge of my beadwork. So I accidentally went through two right here, and I need to go through the rest of those gold beads, and that should be the next two gold right there. And then I'm also going to pass down the green bead closest to my fire polish bead next to the gold bead I'm coming out of, going to the outside edge. And when I pull everything through, I'm out towards the outside edge of my beadwork now, so that I can get into position to add my drop and the loop for my earring finding. So if you'll notice here on my completed earring, the center line of my central crystal here goes up and down, and at the bottom I have the drop, and at the top I have the loop for my earring. So here is the center line of the crystal here, but I'm coming out way over here. I need to work myself down just a little ways. So I'm coming out of the bottom of that same green bead. I'm just going to take my needle and I'm going to jump right through my fire polish bead. Just come right through that fire polish bead, just like that. And then pull your thread through. Now we need to figure out where the position is for the drop. Let's work on the drop. So I position my drop to mimic like it's coming out of the center peridot bead here. There's the center fire polish, so 2 over. And I want to be coming out to the outside edge of the beadwork. So I'm coming out of the fire polish, and I need to be coming out of the bottom of this center green bead. If I can get you to see it right here. So what I'm going to do, because I'm exiting the fire polish bead, I can simply go up through that next delicate bead in the line. And then I can just go right down through the bead I need to be exiting. Now I'm in position to add my drop. And I don't have any exposed thread showing on either side. So now we're going to add this crystal bicone and some of the gold seed beads to create this drop here at the bottom of the earring. For our drop, I want you to pick up 7 of your 11-0 gold delicas. Pick up your 6mm bicone, 3 more of your gold 11-0s, and then just 1 of your size 10 peridot delicate beads. And we're just going to let all of that drop down to the beadwork. Now when we work this, we want to keep in mind where the center line of our crystal is. Because what I want to do is I'm going to make like I'm doing a fringe. I'm going to skip that last delica that I picked up, the green one. I'm going to get it out of my way. And I'm going to come back through the 3 delicas on the far side of my crystal, then my crystal, and then the 1 delica on the side closest to my beadwork. And I'm going to pull that all through, and I'm going to snug that up against my beadwork just like this. Just as if we were making a fringe. But now I want to show you what I figured out about how I need to secure this piece of beadwork to the outside of my frame, such as in brick stitch. So if I let it wiggle, I can see that I started out on the side of my bead frame that's closest to me. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use my finger here to hold that delica so that it sits atop the bead frame, just like that. I am going to come back through all of the beads on this side. I've already come through one, so I need to come through the next 6 beads. Just like that. And you can see that my previous thread is to this back side of the beadwork over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to come under the bead frame. Just like that. If you can see right there, I'm just pushing it directly under my bead frame. Then I'm going to come right back into that very first delica right there. So that when I pull it, the very first delica here on my dangle now sits like a brick stitched bead on the outside edge of my bead frame. So now you need to figure out, well, how are you going to get back to do this side over here? Well, I'm just going to go on down through all of my beads one more time. So I'm going to come through all of my next gold beads in my crystal first. Now pull that all the way through. Then I need to come through the 3 delicas, gold delicas on this side of my crystal, making sure I don't skip any. So come through all 3 of those delicas. Then we're going to come through the little stopper bead here, the green one. And then we're going to come back through the 3 delicas, the crystal, and the very first delica on the other side of the crystal, just like that. So now we can pick up 6 of our gold delicas to make the mirror image from our first side of our dangle. Just make sure you have the right amount. So now I have my 6 on, and I want to make sure, here's my center line of my center crystal, so I know that I want to come up through the middle bead on this side of the fire polish, so that when I pull everything into place, this is what I have. And my dangle is centered down the center line of my crystal, just like that. So now I'm going to push my needle down through the delica right next door. I came up through the center one. I'm going down through the one to the left. And it doesn't matter. You can do the one to the left or the right. But what does matter is that you hold your gold delica so that it sits to the top of this bead frame. So now that I'm coming out there, I'm going to poke my needle back through my bead frame. Just like that. And I'm going to move that tail thread if I can. And now I need to come up through the delica, right there, the very first delica, so that when I pull it, well, I went through my green one, sorry. Just the first gold one. So that when you pull it, it sits that bead along the frame, just like a brick stitch bead. And now, in order to get into position to move on, we're going to have to pass through this dangle one last time. So I'm going to maneuver through all of the gold beads here on the left-hand side. And take your time, because you really want to make sure you don't skip any of your beads, or you'll have a big black thread showing. Let me get my thread out, my tail thread. So now I've come through the 6 beads on the side of my dangle. I'm going to come down through the center bead, the crystal, and the 3 gold beads on the opposite side. And if you can't get them all in one pass, don't worry about it. Get as many as you can. And we will come, just take your time and make sure you don't skip any beads. That's the important part. And I can see here already that I think I skipped a bead right there. So I had to pull my thread back out because I had skipped a bead. Now I went back through all 3 of my gold beads here. And I'm exiting the top, so I need to come through this little green bead. And while I'm going through it, I want to straighten it up so it sits catty corner here at the end of my 3 gold beads. I'm going to pass through that center, that gold peridot. Then I have to come back down through all of the beads again, making sure that I don't skip any. I'm going to start by going through the 3 gold. And when I come through my crystal, I want to make sure I go through the 1 gold delica on the opposite side. So give me just a minute to make sure I'm wiggling into my gold delica. Well, I'm not. I'm going to go ahead and go through my crystal. Then I need to get into that gold delica right there. And I apologize, it's that time of day where my lighting starts getting really reflective. So now that I'm coming out of that delica, it doesn't matter if I go to the left or the right to get back to my bead frame. So I'm just going to go here up the left side. And I'm going to go through the 6 beads on that side. Now I've got to go through 2 more. And I'm back to my bead frame. Just like that. And at this point, I would go ahead and double check and take a look just to make sure that you don't have any exposed thread showing. Because if you do, now would be the time that you would want to take your needle off. And you would want to straighten that up. Pull all the beads off and redo it just to make sure you don't have exposed thread. So mine looks pretty good, and I don't have any exposed thread. So I'm ready to move on, and I need to get up here to where this fire polish bead is on the opposite side so that I can add this little section of beads to create my loop. And then we'll be done with this part of our earring. So the quickest way to get from this fire polish bead section to this one here is obviously going to be straight through the center. So I was exiting the gold bead here as part of my dangle. All I need to do is take my needle and come up through any one of my delicas right there, the green ones. That's from the very first row of beads we added to this bead frame. And once I'm there, then I can come up through 4 gold beads till I'm exiting that little center bead here where we started our netting. So go through the 4 gold beads. And now that we're through that set of beads, we can jump into the next 2 green beads so that we're at the center section of that little setting of grouping of seed beads we added. So now I'm coming out of this center bead here. So now I'm just going to work my way around just like we did before through the 2 gold beads from our very last row of beads we added and the next center green bead until I get towards the top of my beadwork. So I'm going through the 2 gold beads and the peridot bead at the center. And go through 2 more gold beads in the next center bead right here. But before I go any further, I'm going to cut my tail thread off. Get it out of my way. And now I know that I want to be coming up. I need to match this set of beads on this earring here. And the way that I did that is I've brick stitched 2 gold beads above the first delica next to my fire polish here. And if you can see that right here. So I want to be coming out of that bead going towards the outside edge of my beadwork. So right now I am exiting from the peridot bead here. I'm going to move through my next 2 gold and my next peridot here at the center. And because I'm heading in this direction, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get myself positioned to where I'm coming out of the bead here on this side. Because my beadwork, I'm heading this way. All right, so that means I need to come down through. I'm coming out of the middle peridot bead of that grouping of 3. I'm going to go down 1 green bead and over through the gold bead towards the outside edge of the beadwork now. And let's see where I am. Now I need to just work myself down through the gold beads to the right-hand side of that fire polish without skipping any. So I'm going to work through I had come through a second bead on accident, so now I just need to pass through those 2 gold beads. Double check and make sure you don't have exposed thread and that you made it through your beads. Then we need to come out that first delica on this side of my fire polish towards my bead frame. And now I'm in position to add my beads here for my jump ring. So we're going to be working a little brick stitch here at the top to create the loop for our jump ring. And here's this fire polish bead that's centered, our drop is centered over. So we want to center our loop over this fire polish bead. I just went ahead and flipped my work over so that here's the bead I'm exiting, this green bead, to the left of my fire polish. I'm going to start a new row of brick stitch, so I have to pick up 2 gold 11-0s. And I'm going to let them fall down till they hit the beadwork right here. Well, I didn't really need to flip it. I need to just turn it back the other way. Now, I'm going to be working in this direction, so I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to pass back through. I'm going to skip over that first thread bridge here on the outside edge of my ring and go to the other side and pass my needle just under the bead frame. Just like that. And because this is the second bead I picked up over here on the right, I'm going to go up through that bead from the bottom through the top. And I've got myself at a weird angle, so I'm going to flip it. Sorry, guys. I need to go up through this second bead. So now it's on my left because I flipped my work. From the bottom through the top, we're going to pull it and stand it up nice and straight like that. But we're also going to straighten up our first bead. So we're going to come down from the bottom to the top through our first bead. Pull it down. Then we're going to come back up through that second bead from the bottom to the top. So we went from top to bottom through the first one. And then we're going to go up through the second bead again from bottom to top. And then our beads are standing up beside each other. So now I'm going to secure that first bead just a little bit more. I'm going to come back down through it from the top to the bottom. And I'm going to take my needle and just pass it under my bead frame, just like that. Pull my thread all the way through till I'm on the opposite side. Now I'm going to come back up through that same bead from the bottom to the top, from the opposite side of my bead frame. And now I'm exiting this bead closest to my fire polish, right there. Now for this next step, I'm going to show you an easy way to create the loop. I want you to pick up 2 of your 11-0 gold, 1 of your 10-0 peridot, and then 3 of your 11-0 gold. We'll just let all of that drop down to it's sitting here, just like that. I'm going to jump over to the other side of my fire polish bead, and I'm just going to run my needle right underneath my bead frame. But I'm going to hold my finger right here so that it will catch the beads and not let them pass under the bead frame. I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to come back through from the bottom to the top through just that very last bead I picked up. And then when I pull it into position, it brick stitches my first bead to my bead frame, And I have my loop beads here that I'm going to put my jump ring to at the very top. So now I just need to add one more bead. I'm going to pick up one of my 11/0 gold, and I'm going to let it drop down to the beadwork. And we're just going to brick stitch this last bead by skipping over a thread bridge here on the bead frame. So here's the thread bridge. I'm going to skip over that and come under the frame on the other side of it. Pull it through while catching my bead with my finger. Then I'm just going to come back up through that new bead I'm adding from the bottom to the top. And when I pull, it pulls itself into position right there beside the other gold bead. And now I have this little set of beads that looks exactly like the ones here on my other earring. Now I'm just going to work my thread off. So I'm coming out of the top of this bead here on the left. So I'm just going to go down through the bead beside of it. So I'm working back towards my beadwork in the center. I'm going to pull that through. And then I'm going to come down through that green peridot delicate bead right underneath it. Now I've crossed over into my beadwork on this side of the bead frame. So now I just need to tie some half-hitch knots, but I want to move through this fire polish bead right here, so I'm just going to pass right through it. My thread was on the front of my bead frame, so when I pass my needle through it, I keep my thread on the front. I'm going to come down through this green bead on the opposite side, going towards the outside edge of the frame. I'm going to come up through the green one in the center. We're just weaving around till we get to a place where we can tie some half-hitch knots without other beads being in the way. So now I'm going to come down through the bead right there beside my fire polish. And I'm going to pass through my fire polish. Oops, drop my needle. Make sure my thread doesn't get hung up on any of my beadwork. And now I can dig under this fire polish bead right here and catch my little thread bridge right there. And you can feel it catch. I'm going to pull nice and slow till I have my little loop. I'm going to pass my needle right back through that loop. And then when I pull my knot into position, I want to make sure it lands right there beside that fire polish bead. And I'm going to snug it into position. I want to pass down through the delicate bead, up the next delicate bead, down the third one, and now I can tie a half-hitch knot here on the thread bridge underneath this fire polish bead. So I'm going to put my needle under the thread, pull it through really slow, forming my little loop, put my needle through the loop, and then pay attention that when I pull that knot into position, it comes down beside of the fire polish, just like that. Now I'm going to pass through that fire polish bead, and I'm just going to end my thread. So to end this up, I'm just opened up my jump ring, and I've run my jump ring through the green peridot delica at the top of my little loop. And before I close my jump ring, I'm also going to add my earring finding, which is a regular ear wire, French ear wire. Then I'm going to take my other pair of pliers, and I'm just going to close up my jump ring, make sure it's nice and secure. And there we have our finished match to our other earring. You zoom out just a little. And I thought you guys might enjoy that. I thought it was a little bit of a twist on the other earring tutorial that we did. But I really liked the way that it came out. And I really liked the way that this little beading over top of the fire polish beads looked as opposed to the other scalloped look. They're both beautiful. They're both slightly different, but I just really love the way these ones came out, and I wanted to share it with you. All right, folks, so it's been a little bit of a long video, and I appreciate you sticking in here with me. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to click like. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. Head on over to the Bead Mat and subscribe to my newsletter over there. And also, I'm getting ready to have a huge Mother's Day sale on the jewelry on the alluringbeadboutique.com. All right, folks, have a fantastic day, and thank you so much for watching.